Welcome back to Kindness in Real Life. Today's story follows Lily Carter, a surgeon betrayed by her fiancé, Ethan Brooks, who leaves her pregnant for a business deal. Lily rises from the ashes, raising her son Noah alone. When Ethan's world collapses, her kindness offers him redemption. Through love and forgiveness, they rebuild a family. If you enjoy this tale of compassion and hope, please give us a subscribe. It motivates us a ton to keep sharing kindness with you. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and stale coffee. A faint haze drifting from the toaster where Lily Carter had abandoned her breakfast half-eaten. She stood rooted by the marble counter, her green scrubs rumpled from a grueling shift at Mercy General. Dark blonde hair stuck to her neck in sweaty curls, and her hazel eyes, usually bright with focus, were wide, glued to the small plastic stick in her hand. Two pink lines glowed like a stubborn dawn, whispering a truth she hadn't yet wrapped her head around. Her fingers, steady enough to stitch a heart back together, shook like they'd forgotten their purpose. She'd raced home to tell Ethan Brooks, her fiancé of 3 years, the man who'd proposed under a blanket of stars 6 months ago. This was supposed to be their chaos. Unexpected, raw, but theirs. The front door clicked open, and Ethan stepped in, his polished leather shoes tapping a hollow rhythm on the hardwood. He was lean and sharp in a tailored navy suit, sandy brown hair swept back, a man who wore success like a second skin. His gray eyes, once soft when they caught hers, flickered with something cold tonight, guilt, maybe dread. He tugged at his tie with unsteady hands, the silk rustling like a secret slipping free. Lily turned, clutching the pregnancy test like it could anchor her voice splintering as she spoke. "Ethan, I'm pregnant." He froze, his briefcase hitting the floor with a dull thud. Kitchen lights carved shadows across his tan face, catching the twitch in his jaw. "What do you mean you can't?" she began, but he cut her off, his gaze sliding past her to the window where Seattle's skyline shimmered like a cruel tease. "The company's expanding," he said, voice flat as a spreadsheet. "We're moving operations to Singapore next month. I was going to tell you over dinner." Lily's heart stumbled, a clumsy jolt against her chest. "So we'll move together, Ethan. This is our baby." She stepped closer, holding out the test like it could pull him back. But he wouldn't look at her, wouldn't face the two pink lines rewriting their story. "There's no we in this decision, Lily," he said, each word a cold snap. "The board's approved the merger. I'm marrying Vivian Zhang next month." The silence that followed slammed into her like a fist, heavy and icy. Vivian Zhang, daughter of his top investor, a poised heiress with a smile that sealed deals and shattered lives. Lily gripped the counter, her knuckles bleaching against the marble. "Vivian Zhang? How long, Ethan?" Her laugh came out hollow, bouncing off the stainless steel fridge. "I'm carrying your child, and you're talking about a merger?" He reached for his briefcase, movement stiff, like he'd practiced this exit in a mirror. "It's not what you think. It's business. The merger requires business." She lurched forward, her scrubs whispering faintly, her voice swelling like a wave. "Look at me, Ethan. Look me in the eye and tell me the last 3 years meant nothing." He finally met her stare, and what she saw chilled her deeper than his words, an abyss. The man who'd traced stars on her skin, who'd shared greasy takeout in this kitchen, was gone. His gray eyes reflected nothing, a void where love used to live. "I'm sorry," he said, the apology as dead as a dial tone. He turned to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "The accounts will be transferred by morning. Don't try to contact me." "Ethan." Her voice cracked, raw and jagged, but the door clicked shut. The pregnancy test beeped faintly in her hand, its positive chime a cruel echo in the emptiness. Lily stood there, city lights winking through the window like they were laughing at her. Her phone buzzed on the counter, 2 messages flashing up. One from Mia Patel, her fellow resident and best friend. How'd he take it? The other, a news alert. Brooks Innovations announces merger with Zhang Global. CEO Ethan Brooks to wed Vivian Zhang in private Singapore ceremony. The room spun, a sickening tilt that drove her stumbling to the bathroom. She barely reached the toilet before her stomach heaved, emptying the nothing she'd eaten all day. Kneeling on the cold tile, her hand slid to her stomach, a quiet vow forming in the wreckage. Her pager buzzed against her hip. Mercy General needed her for an emergency surgery. Lily hauled herself up, splashing water on her pale face, and caught her reflection in the mirror. Red-rimmed eyes, a woman split in two. Dr. Carter first, jilted fiancé second. Her patients needed her. She snatched her keys, then paused at the counter. The pregnancy test lay there, two pink lines stark against the white plastic. She slipped it into her pocket, a splinter of proof from the night her life broke apart. In the elevator, she tapped out a reply to Mia. He's gone. I'll explain later. Heading to or now. The doors opened to the lobby and Lily stepped out, shoulders back, chin up. 9 months loomed ahead. 9 months to figure out single motherhood. But right now, a life hung in the balance in the operating room, and she'd fight like hell to save it. Her phone buzzed again as she reached her car, a system alert. Your access to the following accounts has been terminated. She deleted it without looking, sliding into the driver's seat. 12 hours left in her shift, a surgery to ace, a future to reclaim. Ethan Brooks had just made the biggest mistake of his life, but she didn't know it yet. Neither did he. The morning sun glared down like a spotlight as Lily slumped against an ATM outside the hospital, her card spitting out, account access denied for the 4th time. Exhaustion from the night shift gnawed at her, blending with a panic that tasted sharp and sour. Her dark blonde hair hung limp, framing a face tight with strain. She'd saved a kid with a busted appendix hours ago, her hands rock solid even as her world fell apart. Now she was locked out of everything. Joint savings, checking, even her personal account. Somehow. Dr. Carter? Mia Patel's voice sliced through the haze. She appeared beside Lily, 2 coffee cups in hand, her petite frame wrapped in a crisp white coat. Mia's warm brown skin glowed despite the early hour, her black hair pulled into a tight bun. Her dark eyes narrowed with worry as she pressed a cup into Lily's hand. You look like death warmed over. Lily's fingers brushed Mia's neatly manicured ones as she took the coffee. He cleaned out everything, she said, voice dull. Joint accounts, my personal one. He even changed the penthouse locks. I tried going home after my shift. She pulled out her phone, showing Mia a cascade of notifications, each one a fresh wound. Jesus, Mia muttered, her grip tightening on her cup. That's illegal. He can't touch your personal account. He did. His name's on everything else. Lily sipped the coffee, wincing as morning sickness turned it acrid. Tastes like poison. Stay with me, Mia said, her tone firm as steel. I've got a spare room since Jen moved out. Lily's phone buzzed. Ethan's mother, Grace Brooks, calling again. She swiped it away. Probably damage control, Mia said. Or she didn't know. Haven't seen the news? Lily shook her head, too drained to care. Mia pulled up an article on her phone. Brooks Innovations announces surprise merger. CEO Ethan Brooks spotted in Singapore with fiancée Vivian Zhang. The photo showed Ethan in a sleek suit, Vivian's hand on his arm, his smile practiced and hollow. Timestamp. 3 days ago. He'd already chosen. A nurse dashed up, panting. Dr. Carter, your patient from last night, the appendectomy, she's crashing. Lily shoved the coffee back at Mia, her white coat flaring as she straightened. Page Dr. Reynolds for backup. I'll be there in 30 seconds. She glanced at Mia. Later. Lives to save first, Mia nodded. Life to rebuild second. Lily bolted toward the oar, the pregnancy test a quiet weight in her pocket. Ethan might have stolen her past, but she'd claw her future back with both hands. And somewhere, deep down, she knew he'd pay for this. She just didn't know how. Not yet. Lily Carter sat on the edge of a narrow cot in the hospital's on-call room, her green scrubs wrinkled from a night of restless sleep. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee, a familiar sting that usually steadied her. Not today. Her phone lay beside her, screen dark after she'd silenced it. 7 missed calls from Ethan's mother, Grace Brooks, and a text from Mia Patel. You good? Patient stable. Get some rest. She hadn't replied. Her hand rested on her stomach, fingers tracing a slow circle over the spot where a tiny life was growing. She'd saved a kid's life in near her last night, stitching up a ruptured appendix with hands that didn't falter. But now, alone in this dim room, she felt the weight of Ethan's betrayal pressing down like a stone. He'd walked out 12 hours ago, leaving her with nothing but a pregnancy test and a hollow promise about bank accounts. She tried the penthouse after her shift. Her key didn't work. The locks were changed, her stuff probably still scattered inside. A life she couldn't reach. Then the ATM had rejected her card, over and over, until Mia found her slumped against it, coffee in hand, fighting tears. Ethan hadn't just left. He'd erased her from his world. Joint savings, her personal account, all gone. She'd moved into Mia's spare room by dawn, a duffel bag of scrubs and a toothbrush all she had left. Her pager buzzed, pulling her back to the present. Another emergency surgery. Lily stood, smoothing her scrubs, and headed to the OR. She couldn't think about Ethan now. Someone needed her focus, her skill. In the scrub room, she washed her hands, the water cold against her skin. Mia appeared beside her, already gowned up. "You sure you're up for this?" Mia asked, voice low. "I'm fine," Lily lied, avoiding her friend's sharp gaze. "Let's go." The surgery was a blur. 4 hours of precision, a teenage girl with a twisted bowel. Lily's hands moved on instinct, cutting, suturing, saving. When it was over, the patient's pulse steadied, and she stepped back, peeling off her gloves. Mia gave her a nod. "Nice work, Dr. Carter." Lily forced a small smile, but her mind was already drifting back to Ethan, his gray eyes, empty as he'd said, "I'm marrying Vivian Zhang." Back in the break room, she sank into a chair, sipping water that tasted flat. Her phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Brooks Innovation seals merger with Zhang Global. Ethan Brooks and Vivian Zhang engaged. She didn't open it. Mia slid into the seat across from her, holding out a protein bar. "Eat. You look like you're about to pass out." "Morning sickness," Lily muttered, taking it. "He's really doing this, isn't he?" Mia's jaw tightened. "Yeah, but you're not alone. I've got you." Lily nodded, grateful but too tired to say it. She'd always been the strong one, top of her residency class, unflinching under pressure. Ethan had loved that about her, or so he'd said. 3 years of late-night talks, shared dreams, a ring on her finger. And now he was halfway across the world, building a new life with someone else. For business. For a merger. She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead, fighting the ache behind her eyes. "I need to figure this out, Mia. The baby, the money, everything. We will," Mia said firmly. "One step at a time." Meanwhile, in Singapore, Ethan Brooks stood in a glass-walled office overlooking the city's skyline. His navy suit was crisp, tie perfectly knotted, but his hands fidgeted with a pen, clicking it over and over. Vivian Zhang sat across from him, her dark hair pulled back, her voice smooth as she reviewed merger documents. "The board's pleased, Ethan. This is a win." He nodded, staring out the window. "Good." His tone was clipped, distracted. He'd landed in Singapore that morning, the flight a haze of whiskey and regret. Lily's face kept flashing in his mind, her hazel eyes wide with shock, her voice breaking as she'd said, "This is our baby." He'd shut her out, locked her accounts, told himself it was necessary. The merger with Zhang Global was his ticket to the top, and Vivian was the key. Her father's billions, her sharp mind. It was a deal he couldn't refuse. But the silence gnawed at him. No text from Lily, no calls. He'd expected her to fight, to demand answers. Instead, nothing. He clicked the pen again, harder. Vivian glanced up. "You're off today. What's wrong?" "Nothing," he lied, setting the pen down. "Just jet lag." She didn't push, returning to her papers, but he knew she'd noticed. Vivian was calculating. Beautiful, yes, but cold in a way Lily never was. He'd traded warmth for power, and the cost was starting to sink in. Back in Seattle, Lily's day dragged on. Rounds, paperwork, another surgery. She moved through it like a machine, her focus a shield against the mess in her head. By evening, she collapsed on Mia's couch, the spare room's bare walls closing in. Her phone buzzed. Grace Brooks again. She answered this time, too exhausted to dodge it. "Lily," Thank God. Grace's voice crackled through. I just heard. I didn't know he'd. It's done, Grace, Lily cut in flat. He's gone. I'm so sorry. Let me help. Money, anything. I don't need your pity. Lily hung up, dropping the phone. Grace meant well, but it didn't change the facts. Ethan had chosen a merger over their child. In Singapore, Ethan sat alone in his hotel room, the city lights blinking outside. He turned off his phone after Grace texted him. You're a fool, Ethan. She's pregnant. He hadn't replied. The merger announcement had gone live. His engagement to Vivian splashed across headlines. It was done, clean, final. So why did his chest feel like it was caving in? He poured a drink, the glass cold in his hand, and stared at the wall. Lily was tough. She'd survive. He made sure she'd be taken care of, hadn't he? The accounts were transferred, the penthouse hers. But the lie tasted bitter, even to him. He'd taken everything, her trust, her future, and left her with scraps. Lily, meanwhile, stood in Mia's kitchen, staring at a stack of bills she couldn't pay. Her lawyer, Mia's cousin, Sam, had called earlier. He's locked you out legally, too. We'll fight it, but it'll take time. She nodded to herself, pocketing the pregnancy test she still carried. It was her proof, her anchor. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. There was a baby counting on her. Her pager went off again, another emergency. She grabbed her coat, heading back to Mercy General. In the car, she whispered to her stomach, "We're tougher than him, little one." The hospital loomed ahead, a beacon in the dark. She'd save lives tonight, like always. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, she'd start rebuilding hers. In Singapore, Ethan finished his drink, the ice clinking in the empty glass. He opened his laptop, pulling up a photo from last year. Him and Lily on a pier, her laughing, his arm around her. He closed it fast, shoving the memory down. The merger was signed. Vivian was his future. Lily was the past. He told himself that until the words stuck, but sleep didn't come. Lily scrubbed in for surgery, her hands steady again. Ethan might have broken her world, but he wouldn't break her. Not yet. Not ever. And somewhere, in the quiet of her resolve, a spark flickered. He'd regret this, and she'd make sure of it. She just didn't know how deep that regret would cut. Neither did he. Lily Carter leaned against the counter in Mia's cramped kitchen, a mug of lukewarm tea in her hands. It was 3 weeks since Ethan Brooks had walked out, and the chaos he'd left behind was starting to settle into something she could grip. Anger, mostly, with a thread of determination woven through it. She'd been crashing at Mia's place, her life pared down to a duffel bag and a stack of hospital scrubs. The penthouse was gone, her accounts still frozen, but she'd opened a new one with Mia's help, scraping together what little cash she had left from a side gig teaching med students. Her hand drifted to her stomach, a habit now, feeling the faint curve where her baby was growing. She was 3 months along, tired all the time, but the nausea had eased enough for her to keep going. At Mercy General, she was a machine, surgeries, rounds, paperwork, repeat. Her latest case, a kid with a rare heart defect, had kept her in the OR past midnight. She'd saved him, her hands steady as ever, and the parents' tearful thanks had lit a small fire in her chest. It wasn't enough to erase Ethan's betrayal, but it reminded her who she was, Dr. Carter, not just the woman he'd left behind. Mia had been her rock, cooking dinners, dragging her to the couch to rest, promising they'd figure it out. "You're not doing this alone," Mia kept saying, and Lily was starting to believe her. Today, though, something shifted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sam, her lawyer. Got a lead on Ethan's moves. "Call me." She dialed him, pacing the kitchen. "What's up?" "He's sloppy," Sam said, voice crackling with excitement. "The merger docs, he backdated some stuff. Your name's still on a few accounts he didn't fully scrub. We can use this." Lily stopped, her grip tightening on the phone. "Use it how?" "Leverage. He's hiding assets. If we push, we can get something back. Money, maybe more." "Do it," she said, firm. "I'm not letting him win." She hung up, a spark flaring in her. Ethan thought he'd buried her, but he'd underestimated her fight. She grabbed her coat. Another surgery waited at the hospital. On the drive, she muttered to her belly, He's not getting away with this, little one. The road stretched ahead, gray and wet under Seattle's drizzle, but her mind was sharp, plotting. In Singapore, Ethan Brooks sat in a sleek conference room, surrounded by suits and charts. The merger with Zhang Global was rolling out, and Brooks Innovations was the talk of the tech world. Vivian Zhang stood at the head of the table, her voice crisp as she outlined the next phase: new factories, bigger contracts. Ethan nodded along, his navy suit pressed, his tie a perfect knot. But his mind wasn't there. He kept seeing Lily, her face when he'd said, "There's no we." It had been weeks, and she hadn't called, hadn't fought back. He'd expected her to chase him, demand answers. The silence was louder than any argument. Vivian caught his eye after the meeting. "You're distracted again," she said, her tone cool. "Just tired," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "Long week." She didn't buy it, but she let it drop, turning back to her notes. Ethan excused himself, stepping onto the balcony. The city sprawled below, all glass and lights, a kingdom he'd traded everything for. Grace had called him yesterday, her voice sharp. "She's pregnant, Ethan. Your child. How could you?" He'd hung up on her, but the words stuck like thorns. He'd sent his lawyers to tie up loose ends, cut Lily off clean, but now he wondered if it was clean enough. Back in Seattle, Lily scrubbed in for her next surgery, a routine appendectomy. The OR was her sanctuary. Here, she controlled the outcome. Mia assisted, their rhythms smooth as they worked. "Sam's on to something," Lily said over the patient's steady beep. "Ethan's not as smart as he thinks." Mia grinned behind her mask. "Good. Nail him." When it was over, Lily peeled off her gloves, the patient stable. She checked her phone, a voicemail from Grace. "Lily, please. I want to help. This isn't what I raised him for." Lily deleted it. Grace's guilt didn't fix anything. Ethan had made his choice. That night, she sat with Mia on the couch, a laptop open between them. Sam had sent files, bank records, merger drafts. "Look here," Mia pointed. "He moved money before he told you." "Premeditated." Lily's jaw tightened. "He planned this. All of it. Sam says we can sue," Mia added, "or use it to negotiate." "I don't want his handouts," Lily said. "I want him to lose something." She started small. Sam filed a claim, digging into Ethan's financial trail. Lily kept working, saving lives, her belly growing under her scrubs. At the hospital, her research proposal on pediatric heart surgery got approved, full funding, her own team. It was a win, a lifeline. Mia threw her a high five in the break room. "While he's playing CEO, you're changing the game." Lily smiled, faint but real. "For the baby. For me." In Singapore, Ethan's world was humming. Stock prices up, Vivian's father beaming. But cracks were forming. His lawyer called late one night. "There's a problem." Lily's team found discrepancies. "She's pushing back." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What discrepancies?" "Account you didn't fully close." "She's got a case." "Fix it." Ethan snapped, hanging up. He poured a drink, the glass slick in his hand. Lily wasn't supposed to fight like this. She was supposed to fade away. He opened his phone, hesitating over her number. No, he cut that tie. She'd get nothing from him. But she was getting something. In Seattle, Lily stood in the hospital cafeteria, holding a letter from the research board. Her heart project was greenlit, a chance to save more kids, build a legacy. Mia joined her, scanning the page. "This is huge, Lily." "Yeah," she said, pocketing it. "He can have his merger. I've got this." Her phone buzzed. Sam again. "We've got him cornered. He's offering a settlement." "How much?" "Enough to start over. But we can push harder." "Push," Lily said. "I want him to feel it." In Singapore, Ethan met Vivian for dinner, a fancy place with too many forks. She was all business, talking expansion, but he barely listened. His lawyer's warning echoed. Lily was coming for him. "You're quiet," Vivian said, sipping wine. "Work stuff," he brushed off. "Nothing big." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. He stared at his plate, appetite gone. He'd built an empire, but felt shaky now, like sand slipping through his fingers. Lily's silence had turned into a roar he couldn't ignore. Back at Mia's, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her baby kicked, a tiny flutter, a reminder of why she was fighting. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was clawing back control. Ethan had taken her trust, her home, her savings, but he couldn't take her strength. She whispered to the dark, "We're tougher than him, little one. You'll see." In Singapore, Ethan tossed in his hotel bed, sleep dodging him. The merger was solid. Vivian was his future, but Lily's shadow lingered. He'd won, hadn't he? So why did it feel like he was losing? His phone stayed dark. No call from her, no pleas. Just quiet defiance, and it rattled him more than he'd admit. Lily, meanwhile, headed to the hospital for another shift. Her research lab was buzzing, her team ready to change lives. Ethan might have broken her once, but she was rebuilding, stronger, sharper. And somewhere, in the fight she was waging, he'd start to feel the cost. Not yet, but soon. Lily Carter stood in the hospital break room, a cup of decaf cooling in her hands. 6 months pregnant now. Her belly pushed against her scrubs, a quiet but constant reminder of a life she was building alone. The past 3 months had been a grind. Surgeries, research, late nights plotting with Sam, her lawyer. Ethan Brooks had tried to bury her, but she'd clawed her way up, piece by piece. Her new bank account was modest, but hers, funded by hospital paychecks and a small grant from her pediatric heart surgery project. She'd moved out of Mia's spare room into a tiny apartment near Mercy General. Bare walls, a second-hand couch, a crib she'd assembled herself. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Her research was taking off. The hospital board had named her lead on a new technique for fixing tiny hearts, and her team was already testing it. Last week, she'd saved a 4-year-old with a valve defect, her hands steady as she stitched under the ear lights. The parents' gratitude had hit her hard. Tears, hugs, a thank you card she'd tucked into her locker. It fueled her, kept her going when exhaustion threatened to win. Mia still hovered like a guard dog, bringing takeout and checking in, but Lily was finding her footing. She didn't need Ethan anymore. She needed herself. Her phone buzzed. Sam again. "He's cracking," he said, voice buzzing with energy. "Ethan's offering more in the settlement. Double what he did last time." Lily leaned against the counter, thinking, why now? Pressure. The merger's shaky, stocks dipping. He wants this quiet. She paused, feeling her baby kick. Push harder. "I don't want his money. I want him to lose something real." Sam chuckled. "You got it. We got leverage. He'll feel it soon." She hung up, a grim satisfaction settling in. Ethan thought he could buy her silence, but she wasn't for sale. She headed to the lab, her team waiting with charts and prototypes. Her project was her fight now, every success a brick in the wall she was building around her and her baby. In Singapore, Ethan Brooks sat in his office, the glass walls reflecting a city that felt less like a prize every day. The merger with Zhang Global was live, factories humming, but the shine was fading. Vivian Zhang paced nearby, her voice sharp as she argued with a supplier on the phone. Ethan stared at his laptop. Stock prices were slipping, not crashing, but enough to make the board nervous. His tie hung loose, his shirt wrinkled from a sleepless night. Lily was haunting him. Not her voice, not her face, but her moves. His lawyer had called yesterday. She's got evidence, backdated transfers, hidden accounts. She's not backing off. He'd upped the settlement, hoping she'd take it and vanish. She hadn't. Instead, she'd pushed back, her lawyer digging deeper. Ethan rubbed his temples, the headache a constant now. Vivian hung up, turning to him. "You're off again. What's going on?" "Legal stuff," he said, vague. "Old business." She frowned but didn't pry, flipping through her tablet. He'd married her last month. A quick ceremony, all business, no warmth. Vivian was a partner, not a wife, and he'd known that going in. But Lily's shadow lingered, her silence a weapon he hadn't expected. His mother, Grace, had called again, begging him to reach out. "She's pregnant, Ethan. Your baby. Fix this." He'd snapped at her to stay out of it, but the guilt gnawed harder. He'd seen a news blip, Lily's research making waves in Seattle. She wasn't crumbling. She was rising, and he was starting to feel the ground shift under him. Back in Seattle, Lily scrubbed in for another surgery, a newborn with a heart defect. Mia was there, handing her tools, their rhythm tight. "Sam says Ethan's sweating," Mia muttered. "You're getting to him." Good, Lily replied, focused on the tiny chest in front of her. She worked fast, precise, and when the baby's pulse steadied, she stepped back, satisfied. Another life saved, another win. In the break room after, she checked her phone, a text from Grace. Please let me help. For the baby. Lily deleted it. Grace's offers were kind, but they came too late. That night, she sat in her apartment, an ultrasound photo pinned to the fridge. Her son, she found out last week, kicked again, a fierce little thump. She smiled, whispering, "We're doing this, buddy." Sam called, his voice triumphant. He's caving. Offered triple the settlement, plus a chunk of stock. He's desperate. Stock. Lily sat up. What kind? Brooks Innovations. Small, but it's something. Take it, she said, and keep pushing. Sam laughed. You're ruthless, Dr. Carter. No, she corrected. I'm a mom. She hung up, plotting. Stock meant power. Maybe not much, but a foothold. Ethan had taken her past. She'd take a piece of his future. She went to bed, dreaming of a tiny heartbeat and a company crumbling. In Singapore, Ethan met his lawyer in a quiet bar, the air thick with smoke. She took the stock, the lawyer said, grim. And she's still coming. She's got proof, enough to hurt you. Ethan's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Proof of what? Fraud. The merger wasn't clean. She could go public. He set the glass down hard. Pay her off. Whatever it takes. She's not after money, the lawyer warned. She wants you to bleed. Ethan left the bar, the night pressing in. Vivian was at home, probably asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing. He'd built this life, power, wealth, a wife who fit the plan, but it felt hollow. Lily wasn't begging. She was fighting and winning. He checked his phone. No messages from her, just a news alert. Seattle surgeon pioneers heart technique, saves infant. He shut it off, the ache in his chest sharper than ever. In Seattle, Lily's life was full. Surgeries, research, a nursery taking shape. She painted the walls yellow, Mia helping with the brushstrokes. He's losing it, Mia said, grinning. Sam says the board's asking questions. Let them, Lily replied, wiping paint from her hands. He made his bed. Her phone buzzed, a settlement draft from Ethan's team, with stock attached. She signed it, keeping the shares. It wasn't enough to topple him, but it was a start. She'd play the long game. In Singapore, Ethan faced the board the next day, their faces tight with worry. Stock's down again, one said. What's this legal mess? Under control. Ethan lied, his voice steady. But it wasn't. Lily's lawyer had sent a warning. Disclose the fraud, or she would. He'd stalled, offering more cash, but she'd taken the stock instead. She was in his company now, a ghost he couldn't shake. That night, he stood on his balcony, the city sprawling below. Vivian slept inside, their marriage a contract holding steady, for now. He thought of Lily, her hands saving lives while his built walls. He'd won the merger, the power, but the cost was creeping up. His phone rang, Grace again. She's keeping your son from you, she said, tearful. Fix this, Ethan. She's keeping herself from me, he muttered, hanging up. He didn't call Lily. He couldn't face her, not yet. In Seattle, Lily lay in bed, her son kicking under her hand. She'd won a battle today, stock, a foothold, a chance to hurt him back. Ethan thought he'd broken her, but she was stronger than that. She whispered to the dark, We're coming for more, little guy. The tide was turning, and she'd ride it all the way. Ethan would feel it soon, maybe not today, but the day was coming, and she'd be ready. Lily Carter sat in the hospital nursery, holding her newborn son, Noah, close. He was 2 days old, born after a whirlwind labor that crashed through her life like a storm. She'd been mid-consultation when the contractions hit, and Mia had hauled her to delivery, half laughing, half scolding. You're not saving anyone else today. Now, in a faded hospital gown, her body sore, but her heart steady, she looked at Noah, dark hair, tiny hands clutching her finger. The chaos of the past 9 months. Ethan Brooks walking out, the lost accounts, the fight to rebuild, faded in this quiet moment. She'd done it alone, but she wasn't broken. Her phone buzzed on the table. Mia's texts, Sam's updates, a soft plea from Grace Brooks. Congratulations, Lily. Please, let me see him. She didn't answer. Grace had been kind, but Ethan's shadow still loomed. Lily had clawed her way back. Her research saving kids, a small apartment, hers alone, shares in Brooks' innovations tucked away as a shield. Noah stirred, and she whispered, "We're tougher than him, little man. We'll always be." In Singapore, Ethan Brooks stood in his penthouse, the city lights mocking him. The merger with Zhang Global was teetering, stocks sliding, Vivian Zhang pulling away. She'd filed for divorce days ago, her voice ice. "You're sinking us, Ethan." Fraud rumors swirled, sparked by Lily's lawyer exposing his dirty deals. The board was restless, his title hanging by a thread. He gripped a glass, the whiskey sharp on his tongue. Lily's moves had undone him. Those shares she'd taken, small but deadly, had tipped the scales. Grace's death a month back had gutted him. At her funeral, he'd stayed in the shadows, her last words ringing. "You have a son, Ethan. Don't lose him too." He'd ignored her, drowning in work, but now a news alert hit his phone. Dr. Lily Carter's heart technique saves infant, wins award. She was rising while he fell. He set the glass down, hands shaking. He'd pushed her away, but the cost was catching up. In Seattle, Lily returned to work after 3 months, Noah in daycare nearby. Her research lab hummed, her technique saving lives, her team growing. She bought more Brooks shares with Grace's trust for Noah, a quiet stake in Ethan's world. Not for revenge, but for protection. Mia met her in the break room, smirking. "He's slipping, Lily. Company's a mess." "Let him fall," Lily said, sipping tea. "We're good. Sam says you've got leverage," Mia added. "What's next?" "Keep it," Lily replied. "For Noah." She scrubbed in for surgery, a 6-year-old with a weak heart. Her hands were sure, Noah's face in her thoughts. The kid pulled through, and she smiled, another life saved. But that night, her phone rang Ethan. She stared at it, then answered, voice cold. "What?" "I'm in Seattle," he said, quiet. "I need to see you." "No," she snapped. "You don't get to decide that." "Lily, please. I'm losing everything. I need to talk." She hung up, heart pounding. He didn't deserve her time, but something in his voice stuck. A crack, a plea. In Singapore, Ethan had left after the call, booking a flight. The board meeting was tomorrow. He'd likely lose his job, but Lily's silence was louder than any vote. Vivian had taken control, her divorce filing the final shove. He landed in Seattle, showing up at Mercy General's lobby, clutching Grace's letter for Noah. "Tell Dr. Carter I'm here," he told the desk, desperate. Security hovered as Lily came down, her white coat sharp, her eyes guarded. "Ethan," she said flat. "Go home." "I don't have one," he admitted, voice raw. "Vivian's gone, the company's dying. I messed up, Lily. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to see him. Our son." "You chose a merger over us," she said, stepping back. "Noah's mine." "I was wrong," he said, eyes wet. "I've lost it all. Grace begged me to fix this. I didn't listen. Now she's gone, and he stopped, holding out the letter. "For him. When he's ready." She took it hesitant. "I'll think about it. Goodbye." Security let him out, but his broken look lingered in her mind. That night, Lily sat with Noah asleep in her arms, opening Grace's envelope. Inside, a note. "Ethan's lost, but he's still Noah's father. Give him a chance for my grandson." Ethan's letter was simpler. "I'm sorry. I'll spend my life making it right if you let me." She set them aside, torn. She hated him, but Noah's face, his father's eyes, softened the edges of her anger. In a cheap Seattle motel, Ethan stared at the wall, jobless, wifeless, alone. He'd hit bottom, and Lily's voice on the phone was the only light left. He didn't call again. He'd wait, prove he'd changed. She'd see it, maybe, someday. 3 years had slipped by since Noah's birth, and Lily Carter stood in her cozy Seattle apartment, watching her son build a tower of blocks on the living room floor. At 3, Noah was a storm of energy, dark hair tousled, his small hands quick and clever as he stacked the pieces with a grin. The apartment was simple but warm. A second-hand couch piled with blankets, a shelf of medical journals next to Noah's picture books, a yellow-painted nursery glowing through the open door. Lily's life had steadied. Her pediatric heart technique was saving lives worldwide, her name etched on awards, her lab a bustling hub at Mercy General. She kept those Brooks Innovation shares, growing them with Sam's guidance, a quiet safety net for Noah. Ethan's company had crumbled, bankruptcy, lawsuits, but she'd let the bitterness fade. Noah's laugh was her anchor now, not revenge. Ethan Brooks, though, hadn't vanished. He'd stayed in Seattle after losing everything: Vivian, his CEO title, his empire of glass and steel. He lived in a cramped studio near the hospital, volunteering at a children's clinic, fixing broken toys, and teaching sick kids basic coding. Grace's death had broken something in him, her final plea, "Don't lose him too," echoing until it stuck. He'd written Lily every month, short notes on plain paper. "I'm still here. I'm trying to be better." She hadn't answered, but she kept them in a drawer, a growing stack she couldn't toss. Then, a week ago, he'd appeared at Mercy General, worn and thin, holding a wooden heart puzzle. "I made it for Noah," he'd said, voice shaky. No strings. She'd taken it, her walls trembling. Today, she'd made a choice. She picked up her phone, fingers hesitating, then dialed. "Meet me at the park. Noon. Bring nothing but yourself." She hung up fast, her stomach nodding. Noah deserved more than a ghost father. He deserved the man Ethan might become. She bundled Noah into a blue jacket, grabbed the puzzle, and headed out, her steps firm but her heart unsteady. The park was alive with Saturday noise, kids shouting, dogs barking, leaves crunching underfoot. Ethan waited by a weathered bench, his coat patched at the elbows, hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked up as they approached, his gray eyes widening. "Lily," he said, then saw Noah, and his breath caught. "He's God, he's real." "Say hi, buddy," Lily prompted, setting Noah down. Noah peeked up, clutching the puzzle. "Hi." Ethan knelt, his voice soft as a prayer. "Hey, little man, I'm Ethan. I made that for you." Noah held it out, grinning. "It's cool. Can you help me?" Ethan glanced at Lily, questioning. She nodded, sitting on the bench, as Noah plopped onto the grass, tugging Ethan down with him. They worked on the puzzle, Noah chattering about shapes, Ethan listening like every word was gold. Lily watched, her chest tight. "He doesn't know you," she said after a while, voice low. "Not yet. I know," Ethan replied, looking up. "I don't deserve this, Lily. I broke everything, us, you, him. But I'm begging for a chance. I've got nothing left but this." "You left us for a merger," she said, arms crossed. "Why should I trust you now?" "Because I'm not that man anymore," he said, raw. "Vivian's gone, the company's dust. I hit bottom, and you fighting, thriving, it showed me what I threw away. I've been trying to claw back since." They stayed there, Noah playing between them. Ethan talked, his fall, the clinic, the nights he'd written those letters hoping she'd read them. "I fix toys and think of him," he said. "Every kid there reminded me what I lost." Lily listened, her anger softening at the edges. "I hated you," she admitted, staring at Noah. "For so long. But he's half you, Ethan. I can't hate that part. I'll earn it," he said, firm. "Every day, every second you give me. I love you, Lily." I never stopped. Weeks turned into months. Ethan came by, part trips first, then story time at her place, then quiet dinners with Noah climbing into his lap. He was patient, steady, showing up with small things, a book for Noah, coffee for her. Noah started calling him Ifan, his toddler voice bright with trust. Lily saw the shift, Ethan's hands gentle as he helped Noah with puzzles, his eyes soft when he looked at her. He got a job at the hospital, fixing equipment in the basement, a humble start. One evening, over takeout, he set his fork down. "I want to fix this, Lily. Us. I'll spend my life proving it." She met his gaze, seeing the man she'd once loved, not flawless, but real. "I forgive you," she said quiet. "For Noah. For me. But it's slow, Ethan. We go slow." "Slow's perfect," he said, a smile breaking through. A year crept by, and Ethan became a fixture. Saturday breakfasts, bedtime stories, hospital shifts where he'd wave at her through the halls. Noah adored him, racing to the door when he arrived. Lily's heart opened, cautious but sure. One night, as Noah slept, Ethan took her hand on the couch. "Marry me again," he said, voice trembling. Not for business, not for anything but us. I love you, Lily. I love him. She paused, then squeezed his hand. Yes, she whispered, but you keep earning it. Every damn day, he promised, pulling her close. The wedding was small, a chapel near the park, Noah in a tiny suit, giggling as he handed them rings. Friend from the hospital clapped, Mia wiping tears. You pulled him back, she told Lily later. That's some kind of love. It's ours, Lily said, watching Ethan lift Noah onto his shoulders. Messy, but ours. They moved into a house, a fixer-upper with a yard for Noah. Ethan worked his shifts, came home to rebuild walls and trust. Lily's lab thrived, her name a beacon, but home was her center. Ethan cooking dinner, Noah drawing hearts on scrap paper. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Noah asleep upstairs, Ethan turned to her. I was lost, Lily. You saved me. We saved each other, she said, leaning into him. And him. The past was a scar, but it didn't bleed anymore. Ethan had fallen, but Lily's love, fierce, patient, had pulled him up. He'd spend his life repairing what he'd broken, and she'd let him, because love wasn't perfect, it was persistent. Noah's laughter drifted through the window, a thread tying them together. We're okay now, Lily said, smiling. Better than okay, Ethan replied, kissing her forehead. We're home. And they were strong, whole, a family forged from ashes into something lasting. Lily and Ethan stood on the porch, the sunset painting their small garden gold as Noah darted around, his laughter bright and free. The sound mingled with the breeze, a simple melody of joy. Ethan wrapped an arm around Lily, whispering, Thank you for giving me a chance. She smiled. Leaning into him, we built this together. The house wasn't perfect. Cracks still lined the walls. Tough days loomed ahead. But it was theirs, forged from love and forgiveness. Life isn't always fair, but real love can heal. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's choosing to rebuild from the ashes. Trust and patience and effort. Happiness doesn't come from perfection, but from hearts that find their way back to each other. No matter how deep the fall, there's always a path home if you're willing to walk it together.